I'm Scott Rainovich. I'm actually in Bozeman, Montana. I'm the principal analyst and founder of Futurium. I'm leading this discussion today on network evolution, driving business transformation. It's a popular topic for everybody. We're going to cover a lot of ground here. And I'd like to remind everybody to send questions in for our panelists. We're going to try to take some time at the end to take some audience questions. I'd like to thank Arrcus and Shekhar for inviting me here today. Shekhar's done a great job of putting together a top-notch panel. So what we're going to talk about is, as everybody knows, there's a lot of transformative technologies coming onto the scene right now. 5G, this thing called Kubernetes, Web 3.0, which is still being defined. There's cryptocurrencies and blockchain. There's the metaverse. There's hybrid and remote work. We're all, zooming in to meetings as we are right now. And of course, there's the persistent connectivity challenges and cyber attacks as well. So all these technologies require a new approach to network infrastructure, something that's more flexible and scalable, something like Arrcus Connected Edge platform. So on that note, let me introduce Shekhar, who's going to tell us a little bit about about Arrcus. Shekhar, of course, is the CEO and chairman of Arrcus. And some of you may know him as the previous GM of the Telco Edge business at VMware. And before that, he led M&A strategy and investments for VMware, making many, many acquisitions. Shekhar's also held leadership roles spanning strategy, product, and business development in a number of companies, including Lucent and McKinsey. So Shekhar, why don't you introduce us to Arrcus and tell us how you guys are going to manage the metaverse.
Thanks, Scott. Thank you. And also thanks for the esteemed panel that we have here. It's going to be a fabulous discussion. I'm really looking forward to it. Just quickly, an introduction for those that don't know Arrcus. We are what our hashtag says, which is network different. And so the way we look at it is that the world has essentially lived in a space where the underlying transport infrastructure has been, for a long time, legacy infrastructure from, I would say, storied providers that people just keep going back to. What we are doing at Arrcus is completely changing this, disaggregating that layer of transport infrastructure, and very similar to what VMware had done to the compute infrastructure, providing a layer of abstraction on top of industry standard hardware to make sure that enterprises as well as service providers can have a significantly lower cost economic value proposition that also drives the ability for them to create new applications, monetize new applications on top of the network, particularly in routing and switching. So think about the Arrcus Connected Edge as that layer of software, when coupled with industry standard hardware, merchant silicon, etc., can go all the way from core to edge and bring this transformation to enterprises as well as service provider customers. So let me pause there, hand it back to you, Scott, because what I will do is, of course, come back at the end and wrap it up a bit more with what we can do from Arrcus to help address some of the concerns that might come out from the panel. But thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Great introduction. And thank you once again. Shekhar's so connected that he was able to bring together this very experienced panel that I'm going to introduce. So I'll start by introducing everybody, and then we'll just dive right into the discussion. So first, I'm going to start at the top there with Krish Prabhu. I actually know Krish from way back in the Tellabs days when I was editor-in-chief of Light Reading. But Krish Prabhu retired as CTO at AT&T after a 40-year career. He previously served as CEO of Tellabs and the COO of Alcatel. So obviously, Krish knows a lot about networks. He's going to tell us about it. And he started his technical career as a member of the technical staff at Bell Labs. So the next over, we have Roy Chestnut. Roy is currently on the board of directors of Telstra, Intelsat, Digital Turbine, and he's a former board member of Saudi Telecom. He has 35 years of wireless industry experience, and he's the former Chief Strategy Officer and Head of Corporate Development at Verizon, and also a GSMA board member. So then we have down there in the lower right. Well, to me, I don't know if it's the same for everybody, but that's Bask Ayyar. Bask is CEO of BaskMind.com, providing advisory and digital transformation service to high-growth Silicon Valley companies and large enterprises. He's also served as the CXO for several companies, including Dell, VMware, Juniper Networks, Honeywell, J&J, and GSK, and many. How many companies did you work for, Bask? Quite a few. So obviously extremely experienced. So we look forward to your input. Yun Frund is Senior Vice President at Equinix, leading global architecture, engineering, and digital experience for products and platforms. Yun has over 25 years of experience in software platform, digital infrastructure, cloud, SaaS, and has led complex digital and cultural transformations for various businesses. So happy to have you here, Yun, as well. Great. Say hi to everybody. So I'm going to kick it off with a question, and I'm going to kick it off with Bask, and then people feel free to weigh in. But Bask, as we mentioned, you have the CIO experience at a wide range of companies, many of them who had different enterprise applications. So can you tell us about what's happening in the enterprise world right now, and what a couple of the most significant transformations that they're handling, and what does that mean for the network?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the time. I think, largely our enterprises have been using networks that was designed in the year 2000. I mean, it's hardware-defined network is what we're using. Let me just contrast to 2000 and what's happening now. In 2000, we had the data center. Everybody was in the data center. There's hardly a cloud. We gave BlackBerries to people. We control all the apps. People came into the office. We issued devices for them. It's largely a Dell device. Security was just deciding which antivirus software to use, more or less. I mean, I'm simplifying, but that's more or less what it is. But look what happened the last few years. We just bring whatever device we want, and work has changed. Everything is hybrid. Nobody comes to work. People are working from home. Companies have to entice people to come back to work. So employees have the choice to come to work or not come to work. They call it work 2.0. And a lot of them have, for 2 years, we worked very well at home. So when we come into the office, we find that we have old networks. Designed the branches network have been, don't work as well as some of the homes as they do. And then the dependence on the data center is not as important. My private data center is not as important as the cloud. Most of my applications are running on the cloud. So you got a hybrid kind of environment. You bring your own devices, your own phones. And so the CIO is under, and the security is just nightmare right now to manage. So the CIO is under threat from a lot of places. But the positive side is, it's a tremendous time to be a CTO or a CIO in an organization. You have some really good technologies coming where you can do wonderful things. For example, if you take the healthcare industry, for example, it used to take us 10 years, 11 years to bring a product to, a vaccine to the market in J&J and Glaxo. We got 3-4 vaccines in the last year. It's about with incredible speed. So the compute and the work that is required to create these kind of products have gone exponential. If you take retail, the retailers who are digitized thrived during the pandemic, and the people who did not digitize almost died, right? I mean, it's a year of e-commerce, delivery, etc. And then we're going through some challenges now with things like supply chain crisis, etc., which is going to force us to do more things locally. Like you saw Intel starting huge manufacturing plants in Ohio, and you're going to see more of that. Tremendous pressure on the network between intelligent robots, IoT devices, 5G. We're going to use up 5G. The examples we're using for 5G right now are things like you can download Netflix before you get on the plane. Who wants that? You're going to need 5G to have self-driving trucks, self-driving cars. The kind of robots and robotics we're putting in. So I think it's a fabulous opportunity for a CTO or CIO to redefine a hybrid environment, hybrid cloud. And from a security standpoint, the only way to handle this is software defined. The threat vectors are changing on a daily basis. You cannot keep upgrading your hardware in the time required. So I think, it's a right time for us to do a redesign of our network, look at emerging vendors who can handle software defined. And, I think Kennedy said the right time to fix your roof is when the sun is shining. So the right time to fix the network is now, not wait till all of us come back into work and start demanding the things and then start bringing our self-driven trucks and cars and IoT devices. So I think it's an exciting opportunity for us to do a lot of redesign on the network area.
Yeah, those are some great points, Bask. It's almost like the pandemic was like an aha moment for enterprises. I think, like you said, you got to prepare for things before they happen. Around here, we have a lot of fires in the summer sometimes, and there was a big fire in town, and a couple of my friends unfortunately lost their houses, and it was an aha moment for us. Like we weren't prepared. Like, what do we do if there's a fire? Like, how do we prepare? That was kind of like what the pandemic was for enterprise. So,
I mean, one of the things,
Roy.
Scott, I was able to see is even during the pandemic, actually, interestingly, we've seen some CIOs particularly use that time to fortify their networks and actually take some advantage of the downtime to get things in order. I mean, in fact, at OCP, the folks at Target spoke along with me in terms of how they're doing this as a transformation to their network. So I think I agree vehemently with what Bask said, and I think the forethinkers on the enterprise side have actually taken advantage of this time to start putting in place at least the basic building blocks for how they're going to make their enterprise more adaptive from the network side.
exactly. So Roy's got a lot of experience in service provider networks, and Bask referred to some of the communications networks that are necessary, including, of course, the famous 5G. So, Roy, why don't you talk about some of the challenges and opportunities that this new environment is presenting to service providers?
Yeah, thanks, Scott. And just to build on what Beth said, I was laughing to myself that I'm on 3 audit committees, and the audit committee on these boards basically looks for every dark swan that could ever come and attack your business in any way, shape, or form. And on none of those committees did we ever anticipate a pandemic. So you just never know what to prepare for. And but the pandemic did create an accelerant for digitization. So to Baskin's point, the ones that were already there did really well, but the ones that were kind of starting there really accelerated that journey. And I think carriers are no different. From an industry standpoint, not saying anything about any particular carrier, and this is my opinion, I kind of view 5G in 3 kind of overlapping dimensions. The first dimension I jokingly call kind of the PR phase, because this is a land grab for carriers to get out there and say, A, I got the best coverage, or B, I got the best speeds. And I kind of also joke, you can win that battle with CapEx, and you can also win it with marketing dollars. But it's just trying to get out in front of the consumer messaging. But as probably most of you know, the industry is struggling with monetizing 5G on the consumer side. And a lot of that's because of, heavy competition, full penetration, pricing pressure, regulatory pressure. But the carriers, they need to do it anyway, because what 5G is giving them is, a better way to get better spectrum efficiency, and lower their costs on data delivery. So they kind of have to do it regardless. And I think there's some bright spots for consumer, gaming people talk a lot about. But to me, enterprise will be the big prize, which is unique to the telecom industry because they have not really been monetizing enterprise like consumer. The second phase of 5G to me is really, and this is a broad definition of 5G in my world, is like this is cost transformation. This is what Bass was talking about taking the legacy infrastructure and virtualizing it. It goes beyond that to digitize your customer touch points, to take the costs out of the business that are historically there, and reduce your cost structure, because the enterprise use cases are not here yet. We talk a lot about autonomous vehicles and healthcare, but there's going to be a lot more, and throw private 5G in there. But the carriers need to be ready for that. And if they don't dramatically, reduce their cost structures and cost transformation, they won't be able to take advantage of these growth spurts, because the growth in enterprise will be outpaced by the melting ice cube beneath them. And so I think that's what's going on. Telstra is a good example. I'm on the board where they've gone through a strategy called T22, which dramatically transformed the business. Heroic work by the management team, great efforts, but at the end of the day, that gets you to the starting point. So I think the carriers need to get to the starting point. So when the enterprise use cases come into play, they can be there to take advantage of it. And finally, what I'd say is, if I'm a carrier, I'm paranoid about not letting 5G get 4G'd. And what I mean by that is when we deployed LTE 4G across the Fruited Plains, we deployed all the capital, but all Shekhar's and Yoon's neighbors out there on the West Coast, they built these beautiful platform companies that disproportionately monetize the value above the network. And the carriers aren't going to be able to capture all that value, but they need to be able to play above the network in 5G through partnerships with whoever, hyperscalers or use case providers, and at least play in that space so they don't get pushed into pure commoditization of connectivity like they did in 4G. Not completely, but that's what I think they need to be watching out for.
That's a great point. That's one of my favorite topics is as you put it, 4G or dumb piped, as I like to call it. Krish, does any of this make you want to go back to running service provider networks, or are you afraid of all this? What do you think?
No, I'm having a great time retired. I don't want to be back in the fray. Leave it to brighter minds like Shekhar to do that.
Yeah. Okay.
I was going to tell Roy that the next logo in MWC, I think for the GSMA could be, we won't be 4G'd. It's like,
yeah, like that. Yeah, no dumb pipes for us. So Yoon, you're kind of Equinix is at the center of everything. I mean, you connect the cloud communications providers with the service providers, with the enterprises, kind of like you're the hub, if you will. Now, tell us how all this is unfolding at Equinix. Like, how are you seeing the world?
Great, thank you. Thank you, Shekhar and Scott, again for inviting me to this webinar. So you are absolutely right. I think we see it's in the middle, and we have this neutrality as Equinix, and we see the trend of cloud and edge, and as well as some of this enterprise. A majority of the enterprise are really demanding that or driving this hybrid multi-cloud trend for their digital transformation, like what Bask and Shekhar saying. And in fact, in the pandemic, it really a lot of company has accelerated their digital strategy. Really want to do this because it's about survival and thriving. If they don't do it, they can become irrelevant. So we see a lot of our business also growing with all the enterprises wanting to achieve that digital strategy. So I think all these things, like with the 5G, with the edge, with the cloud and telecommunication network service provider, a lot of them trend are converging. What I see is, these at our data centers as Equinix, right? We house a huge amount of network service providers, cloud service provider. We have 10,000 customers, 230 data centers. We have global platform to connect all these things together, right? Whether it's data traffic, internet traffic, or data, whether it's how do you bring the enterprise, providing them the easy one-click to cloud options so that achieve that digital strategy, as well as helping them to really connect to their ecosystem and partners and bring some of this workload to some of the private data center to achieve some of the performance and low latency need, and really providing that connective tissue among all this network. It's like what Shekhar was saying, a big gigantic network, how can they all connect together? So we obviously leverage a lot of the telecommunication company gear like Cisco, Juniper, and Arista to deliver that global connectivity. What we see is the enterprise are demanding a lot of easy button SaaS service so that make their journey much easier, and providing that and making sure their connection or as well as their connectivity are secure, and private with a high performance. So the other trend I also want to see highlight is as we continue scale, right, to meet some of this big demand is about, how do we deliver that high reliable and available, on-demand service to our customer. A lot of those demand drive more software-driven approach, providing even the underlying transport layer and IP network. We using different vendors, we actually see a lot of demand in delivering the observability, programmability, these things in terms of telemetry to our customers, so they can manage their network much better. So definitely software is really in the center heart of the network evolution, as Bas mentioned. So
that's great. And I'm going to go back to Shekhar in a little bit after Chris. He's going to talk about this software resiliency that we need. But one of the takeaways from your point, Yoon, is like the networks are more interconnected than they ever were before. I mean, now when you're using an application, you don't know whether you're on an Equinix network or a Microsoft network or an AT&T network, and there's peering and exchanges, and the internet is becoming more robust, I think, than anybody ever thought, in terms of running applications. I think that's very interesting. But Chris knows more about that than I do because he designed these networks. He was one of the original architects of virtualization in the carrier networks at AT&T. Now, Chris, now you look at this new, you helped build, I imagine it was 4G, right? And now you're seeing all your successors try to build 5G. So what would you say to them about how they move into this new world of this convergence of networks, cloud networks, the data center networks, the enterprise networks are all, I like to say they're merging, really. They're becoming one interconnected network. What's your advice or observations on this new infrastructure?
Good question, Scott. So going back about 10 years, when we launched 4G in AT&T's network, we saw that the traffic in the core was growing 50% each year for several years, yet the revenue was not growing, which was a big problem because what we can spend on the network is indexed back to the revenue. So one of our challenges as network architects was how do we bend the cost curve? And we quickly realized that the big problem was the underlying transport network with very rigid hardware and software. When we instrumented our core network and measured traffic flows, we saw that only 40% of the available capacity was being consumed on the average. And our ability to go up to 70%, 80%, in computer networks, you never want to run at 100%, but if you can go up to 70%, that would be a tremendous saving in cost. So we said there were some fundamental principles that one had to follow. Separate the hardware from software, virtualize as much as you can because that gives you great benefits, consumption benefits, and also to the extent possible, have hardware use merchant silicon as opposed to custom silicon because that gives you an ability to ride Moore's law. Our ability to do a whole lot with our deployed core in the middle of the 4G traffic ramp up was somewhat limited, but some of the techniques that we had introduced then have now evolved to open hardware, as what you see in Open RAN, for example. A lot of the 5G is going to be based on Open RAN. It's evolved to the edge. So I'm very happy that the architectural principles that are being deployed by today's network engineers have learned something from the example of 10 years back. One thing we did manage to do back in 2013, 14 was once we had a software-defined core, we were able to offer spin up some services. For example, we had a network on demand service that was pretty popular, may still be in metro areas, where large metro enterprises like hospital networks, university networks can, on demand basis, spin up extra capacity just to meet some of their surges. Now, if you had a programmable fabric that was dynamic and agile, then, or if you had Shekhar and Arrcus back in those days, I think we could have done a lot more in terms of new services, new enterprise offerings. Let me move forward. The question that you asked, Scott, is really what would I do for 5G? I think Roy painted a really good picture about what 5G can offer. 5G, we have about 5 to 10 times more spectrum than we had in 4G. In the US, when the last auction concluded, nearly $90 billion was spent on that spectrum. So it'd be a terrible waste of spectrum and money if all 5G does is what 4G did. So I'm very hopeful that over the next decade, we'll find not only more throughput to the endpoints, not only more endpoints deployed and connected, but also endpoints having the ability to spin up, consume applications, consume content very close to where these endpoints are, because that's what you would need for autonomous machines. In my career, goes back to the early 80s. In the mid 90s, we saw big traffic growth with DSL. I was with Alcatel at that time, but we were literally putting out a fire. We didn't think too much about where does this go. I talked about the 4G launch, but we were limited by the ability of deployed infrastructure to be able to do a whole lot. But going forward, as the big wave hits us at the end of this decade, I really wish that network designers, network planners, CTOs, CIOs think a little bit about programmable fabric that can be reprogrammed almost on the fly, that can work with existing deployed infrastructure so you don't have to rip and replace everything, and yet give you an ability to handle all the traffic growth at very good unit cost, but yet be able to meet the demands of a 5G consumer base as well as a 5G enterprise base. And I think the person best positioned to answer that is Shekhar. Shekhar's been working on what his company can do. And so I'd like to listen to what Shekhar has to say.
Great point. Yeah, let's hear it, Shekhar.
Yeah, no, I think, well, first of all, I think phenomenal insights from everyone, both, I would say, historic as well as where we are today. I think to what Krish just said, to me, it's evident from all the conversations that we're having with both enterprise customers as well as service providers, that the motivation is there right now to make sure that the infrastructure becomes more dynamic and disaggregated. I think to the credit of many of you on this panel, the NFV wave brought in this sort of disaggregation into, I would say, the carrier core. Then I think ORAN, as you were just talking about, Krish, is taking that into the radio network. I think where the spotlight is now shining is on the transport network, because while we have collectively taken, I would say, advantage of disaggregated infrastructure on both these other points in the network, the transport network is still pretty legacy if you think about it in almost all enterprises and carriers. And some of it is the sort of old IBM adage where you just blindly keep trusting who you have always trusted, and you're a bit blindsided in terms of what is out there. And so at Arrcus, for example, with our Arrcus Connected Edge, we are singularly focused on making sure that this disaggregated infrastructure makes its way into the transport network. So all the way from the extreme carrier core to the other side, kind of the enterprise data center, we have customers that are working with us today, where on the one end, these are examples like taking a large chassis router and replacing it with a distributed disaggregated architecture. On the other side, it's a data center spine leaf or top of rack switch that's then transplanted or transformed using this software defined analogy. And then somewhere in the middle is the edge. And in the edge, once again, on the service provider side, for example, SoftBank just announced at Mobile World Congress how they're working with us in terms of a transformative architecture for their mobile user plane with technology called SRv6. And this particularly allows them to go and take their mobile traffic and then effectively translate that into IP traffic so that a lot of what you can do on the IP network is now applicable to the mobile network. On the enterprise edge, as I mentioned, companies like Target are now starting to do, I'd say, transformative work in terms of going for industry standard architectures. So I think many of the notions we're talking about here, we as a partner, supplier, vendor to the community are starting to see the beginnings. But I still think there is a long way to go before a majority of service providers and enterprises get to that point. And of course, selfishly, that's the journey we are on. We're kind of going and hammering this message to every customer that we can bring to, much like I described VMware had done in the prior decade in terms of what's happening in the compute infrastructure. But it is just fascinating to see all these things kind of come around to a point where you cannot live with inefficiency anymore. And at the same time, I think 5G is also raising the bar on how you can create new monetizable services flexibly on top of this architecture. And of course, we're helping our customers do both.
Okay, that's great. But one of the things I'm also hearing is a lot of this has to be done with software, right? I mean, we obviously everybody needs hardware, but it's really enabled now by software, right?
Yeah,
So,
it is. I think that definitely, I think software plays a big role. I think much like you've heard, I mean, to me, it's fairly simple. If you want dynamism, programmability, the ability to launch new services, then you have to do it in a software-defined way. I mean, gone are the days where you could live for 3 years. I mean, it used to be the case that you needed a new feature in a telecom carrier, and Krish knows as well. And you needed, and Roy as well, right? And you needed to deploy that in your network, and you could afford to tell your vendors 4 years in advance. They would design a chip to help do that, go through all the test cycles, and 4 or 5 years later, you have a messaging service, right? Today, you've got like everybody and their brother ready to go and build an app and throw it on the cloud, and helped by, of course, folks like Equinix, et cetera, in terms of how they can manage that giant network in the back. And so that's why I think you have to do it in a software-defined way.
yeah, that's great. I'm going to go to Yoon in a second for a question, but first I want to remind everybody that we are taking audience questions. So we've got some good ones coming in. Keep them flowing. We will have time to answer those. But next, I'm going to go to Yoon and ask about, like, we're talking about all these interconnected networks, and everything, of course, is connected to the internet, which is filled with threats. And cyber security is top of mind for everybody. You know, from the security admin level to the CISO and the board level. So tell us about the cybersecurity challenge and how we're dealing with that, Yoon.
Yeah, so yeah, with the current situation, even all of you know that with the Ukraine and Russian, invading Ukraine, there's a lot of discussion in the industry these days about cybersecurity. In fact, it's one of the reasons keep me awake at night, because I think almost every company get hacked, right? The information is the king, and a lot of ransomware out there. So with all this disparate network out there, different emerging, kind of a trend, I think software and can detect, and AI and machine learning can detect this anomaly and cyber attack effectively and quickly, and take approach to proactively monitor and stop those actions, stop those attacks. So I think like what Bas talked about, you can do this very effectively within the software, within milliseconds, detect the anomaly attack, and making sure all your golden fortresses being built without further leaking of the situation. So I think that's why software and cybersecurity is also very connected, and you can do a lot of these cybersecurity detections and taking actions within software itself.
That's great.
One thing I would add, Scott, is as we look at the route infrastructure supporting security, it becomes very critical to understand that much of the world is still reliant on this giant network of routers and switches that are out there in the IP network. And in particular, we've perfected at Arrcus technologies like route origin validation as an example, right? I mean, so if you know where your traffic is coming from and you can actually verify that before you just kind of open up your gates, that's an example of how plumbing can play a role in making sure that everything that rides on top is in fact secure. But it's a great point, Yoon. So
Yeah, and you know the main point is that with whether you're using AI or machine learning or the software, the main point is automation, right? Because the world is moving too fast now for humans to keep up with alerts and configuration changes, and so we're clearly moving to a world of automation. Bask, with all this network transformation going on and all these stakeholders, I mean, we've talked about, you know, the communication providers, the enterprises, the cloud providers, the data center operators. Who's driving the agenda forward? I mean, who's taking the reins here?
Yeah, I think there is a question of who should and who is driving it. I think at this stage, typically the decisions on network goes to the network administrator. Nothing wrong, but change has to come from the very top. I mean, there's digital transformation. It's business change is why you do this. So the CIO and the CTO has to push it from the very top. You know, you should take an interest in networking and the fact that it is pretty fundamental. I mean, technically, you don't need to know about everything that's going on, but you need to know that fundamentals that you have is pretty critical for all your business apps. And also certain principles, like, I mean, I work for hardware companies and software companies. It's very difficult for hardware companies to do software. I mean, people are going to challenge me on this, but I can't think of too many hardware companies who've done well in software. They always struggle. And perhaps likewise software companies. That's why VMware was able to come in and disrupt the whole industry in places that we never expected, because you think in a layer of abstraction. And so I think, so the CIO has to form this relationship with new and emerging companies and make sure that he or she has an open mind to push those changes. Otherwise, it's going to be status quo, and is very comfortable just there's only two or three providers, actually 2 or 3 hardware vendors who provide networks forever and ever and ever that I've known. So that's the only decision you come back to, more or less, and it becomes a comfort factor for folks. So leadership should push and say, why not, and challenge that, and also try to leverage the hardware you've deployed. You still need a hardware to run your gear, but can you abstract it with some software so that you leverage the investment you made, but use some modern technology? Trying to take your old gear and try to put AI and ML is just not possible. Just the physics won't work.
Yeah, can I add, Scott?
Sure, jump in.
I agree with everything Bass said, but I think in addition to the CTO and the CIO, it's got to be the CEO and it's got to be the board, because although it's a technical problem to solve, the threat is at the entire enterprise, everything from government relations all the way down to the audit committees and to the CEO. And the transformation that I've seen best at carriers across the globe is when the CEO and the board owned it. You can't set it up as a little project, side project that you're going to do this innovation or this thing. And then the other thing I'd say about cyber, and obviously a big topic at every meeting I'm involved in, is that carriers, they're a big target for this. And they want to be able to monetize it, but cyber is one of these things where it's tough to compete a little bit in that space, because you also want to collaborate, because everybody's going to get hit at some point in time. And so you learn as much from your competitors and your ecosystem mates as you do internally. So it's a huge problem to solve.
Yeah,
I mean, one thing I wanted to add, Scott, to what both Bask as well as Roy said is, sometimes there's too much of a temptation to hit the easy button. So at least kind of in customers we talk to, there are a number of people that say, hey, we're just going to the cloud. And that seems to be an answer to everything. And it's like the hyperscalers will solve it for us. Now, of course, the hyperscalers do a good bit of this, etc. So not to belittle their contribution to the architecture, but I think there is a great threat to just complete trust in a single cloud, which we're finding now is starting to play out. I mean, sometimes it's just the hyperscaler bills are too large, or sometimes it is like I'm using cloud A and cloud B and I have no idea how I'm going to connect these things. Or sometimes it is, I have a little bit of private infrastructure and I have these other things. So I think the involvement of the CIO, the CISO, the CTO, the CEO, the board, understanding that some of these decisions, while they may look good in the tactical short term, they are in fact going to come back to bite in the long term is important. And I think that sort of strategic viewpoint definitely needs to set in, particularly I would say in the F100 enterprises and service providers. Maybe okay for some small, medium businesses in terms of how they do business. But I think I would actually caution people against just hitting the easy button without understanding what policies are you in control of. How do you know what your network is actually doing, and what can you do in order to enable that?
Yeah, it's a great point. You know, I think one of the the great demonstrations of long-term vision in the technology was Amazon and Jeff Bezos that sacrificed what, like 5 or 6 years of profitability, where they were making zero money, pumping billions and billions of dollars into this thing called Amazon Web Services. And there were people questioning, well, why are they spending all this money in it? You know, well, they were building the most valuable asset on earth. That's what they were doing. It's very interesting. So anyway, you brought up a couple of questions that I have, but I'm gonna have a two-part question because we had an audience question about private wireless. By the way, keep the audience questions coming. There's this thing called private wireless, which people aren't familiar with it. Either using 4G technologies or 5G technologies for enterprises to build their own wireless networks using spectrum, you know, rather than, you know, either wired networks or Wi-Fi, you know, say, for example, wire up a factory and provide, you know, automation. So I'll start with Krish, but Roy or anybody can jump in. My first part of this question is this going to be a real market, you know, enterprise private wireless? And second of all, it brings up all these co-opetition issues that I talked about. Like Amazon has a private wireless service now, which is very interesting. And then, you know, of course, Azure is looking at it, and Microsoft Azure partners with AT&T to provide network connectivity. So there's kind of this, you know, to go back to Roy's, don't get 4G'd or don't get dumb pipe. There's all this interesting co-opetition going on, and the cloud providers, in addition to being partners, they're also a threat to provide these new enterprise services. So I'm curious to what you guys think about that. I'll start with Krish since he's one of the telecom guys here.
Yeah, thanks, Scott. My take on private wireless is that the spectrum that's been set aside for private is actually been there even for 4G, or could have been used by carriers, part of their spectrum portfolio to do private networks. The 5G air interface has very superior characteristics when it comes to low latency, high bandwidth, large amount of connectivity, connected devices. So there's a good chance that private 5G may actually take off, whereas private 4G did not take off. Now, the question always is, how does this compare with Wi-Fi and Wi-Fi 6? And the answer to that is the 5G air interface allows you to go around certain obstructions just because the emitted power is much greater than what you have on a Wi-Fi interface. And a lot of industrial automation environments have built-in obstruction in the form of metal or cement or this or that. So yes, it's possible that 5G wireless can actually be a big growth market. But then again, the question always comes back to who's going to make the investment. And Basque, the CIO, knows that he only had 3% or 2% of the capital budget for putting something in his network. Chicken and egg, but if it does take off in a big way and they introduce AI on top of it and robotics and drones, then they can start making a case for productivity gains which justify the investment.
Roy, do you have thoughts on this?
Well, first of all, I agree with everything Krish said. I think the difference, the nuance I'd put on it is if you'd ask CEOs, maybe CTOs 3 to 5 years ago about private 5G, they would say, no way, we don't want that. The macro network's going to be able to take care of all that. I think what, from a global standpoint, global telecoms are realizing is they don't have the CapEx dollars to deploy 5G to the degree that they did 4G. And they've got to spend so much CapEx just to keep up with growing demand. So that creates opportunities for either remote locations. Mining in Australia is a big one that is probably going to go 5G, but it just gives them ownership over manufacturing, et cetera. So the challenge for the carriers, of course, is going to be, how do I play in that? Because they know how to build networks and operate networks. It's not how they make their margin today. But if it's an opportunity for them to share some of the the revenue that comes off the use case, and they can partner in that, they may be able to play. But I think most carriers I talk to aren't sure exactly how to play that yet. There's a few little examples around the globe. Verizon's building a private 5G network in the harbors of London right now, and you see little spots like that. But I think it's going to be bigger than people think, but for a lot of the reasons that Chris just said.
Yeah, that's a great point. I'm gonna open up to the rest of the panelists, because we had an audience question, and this is a good segue, whether it's private wireless or whatever. What are the new applications, the hot applications that we haven't thought deeply about that are going to either take off or make people money using this new software defined network transformation? Does anybody want to pop in on that one?
Yeah, well, maybe I'll start based on what we're seeing. So I think I would classify it in kind of two areas. One is a bit futuristic and high-flying, sometimes appearing more pie in the sky in terms of the aspirations of what people are doing, and then some others that are more here and now and what kind of increases or improves productivity. So in the first category, there's obviously a lot of talk about things like AR, VR, metaverse, gaming, cryptocurrencies. So there's the whole Web 3.0 spectrum of applications. And while I'm not a gamer and I hate wearing a helmet on my head and walking around and stuff like that, I am actually optimistic about the fact that a number of these things are going to lead to real improvements. I mean, for example, even today, you've got virtual events, and in virtual events in the metaverse, you've got advertisements from real advertisers in terms of what their products and services are doing, and then people actually go and buy these things. So it's an example of how you can take what is otherwise virtual and then connect that to the real world and then get some actual value out of it, so that it transforms some of the ad spend from newspapers and radios to what is happening in the metaverse, right? I mean, that's a simple example of this. So I am a believer that as the application interface becomes more programmable, and as more and more people are able to now create things, that you will find uses of things that will create value, much like the iPhone. I mean, 15, 20 years back, it was unthinkable for us to feel like our entire life is going to depend on our phone. And then today, that's what happens, right? You can't actually leave home without your phone. I mean, you can leave home without your Visa card, but you can't leave home without your phone. So that's what I think will happen in the realm of applications which are more futuristic. Now, the here and now stuff, I think, to what Basket said early on, productivity improvement type applications. I mean, things that are remote at work, or just being able to, I mean, the thing I pointed out about cloud dependency. So multi-cloud networking is an example of what a lot of our customers are looking for, and what a lot of carriers could actually offer from a service standpoint. Just the ability to go in and say, you've got policies and applications that can be created across different cloud domains and capacities. So these are all things I think that people can do for today's needs. But overall, I think all of this points to the fact that you need not just high bandwidth, low latency, and jitter characteristics that match your new wireless networks, but you need to support and supplement that by an agile, programmable transport network that is secure and that can create applications for you like you want them. But these are examples that we've seen already.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm able to add a little bit, just in terms of characteristic of these applications or service provider perspective, we also see you know, there's a lot of upcoming company like a Cloudflare, and they're winning a lot of, you know, market share. So it's the nature of those services from service provider perspective is more cloud native, globally distributed, software defined, very easy to deploy, and is easy to manage. So those are the, I would say that very elastically they can scale vertically. And so that those are the things that characteristic and from service provider perspective, they need to care for in order to win this war.
Excellent, thanks. Vask, you got anything to add? I mean, you see a lot of
Yeah.
different technologies. What are the killer apps?
So there are some, let me give some here and now, I mean, which is surprising. We all have smart IoT devices at home, you know, the garage opener, the door openers, and smart August locks, and so on. All these are being deployed in the companies. It's just that the CIOs and CTOs are not aware of them. You know, it's called building automation system, and you assume it's something that Honeywell or Johnson Control deploys, but all of them are computer systems. You got video cameras. So there's so many branches. Nobody's going in to check if the branch is, you know, operation or not. You know, the security guys are installing these cameras. I guarantee you, all the security cameras, the password, they're all running on a Linux or Android version. They have never been upgraded ever, and their password is admin. I mean, almost you can go and check. And the time you want to investigate, use the cameras for an investigation, that's when you'll find out that the cameras are offline, right? Because the IT guys are not aware of that. So we went too far in IoT a little early, but this is the year of IoT because you don't have people to go monitor if your conference room is working, whatever, and people are plugging all these things into the network. So how do you manage, monitor, control, all that stuff is very interesting. You know, you can't take it back. People are going to say, why am I using a stupid badge to get into that company? Whereas I can walk in and my door opens when I go home. You know, why can't it be like Star Trek doors? That's one. But then take industries. Pharmaceutical, let me, again, it just boggles my mind how much supercomputers and quantum computing is going into molecular modeling of the molecule in pharmaceuticals. Enormous amount of compute. We still are banging a lot of things, and it's a trial and error on which molecule works and what efficiency they have, but they're getting better and better and better. So the pharmaceutical industries of now, of biotech, look pretty much like an MIT lab or a computer lab, and that's where they're headed. The amount of compute they require is just phenomenal. So I think those applications on I think healthcare was never used to be cool. It used to be the slow approval, whatever. You're going to find that healthcare is cool, and not only does it save lives, but it's also cool, right? So I think you're going to find that happening. And everybody's skeptical about the self-driving cars. I'm not. I drove from California to Florida on my self-driving car. Almost all the time. Every time when my wife was watching, I had to, I touched it. Otherwise, I was self-driving. This thing actually works. So I just found out that we have a huge trucking problem in this country. There's not enough truckers, and the job is just mind-numbing and not paid enough. So instead of self-driving cars, you're going to have self-driving trucks. You're going to have self-driving shuttles in going around campuses and so on. This is just happening. It is just, there are companies like Samsara rolling this out, several kind of devices for these trucks, etc. So the CTO, CXO, I mean, I think it's an exciting period. A lot of people get scared when they look at the future. I actually get really excited to say, finally, I'm going to have some technologies that are going to be cool in the enterprise.
That's great. Well, we got just a few minutes left. I'm gonna hand it over to Shekhar here. If Shekhar has a final question to ask for our panelists to wrap it up. Shekhar, what's your big thought of the day?
Well, I think the thought of the day is clear that there's a great amount of consensus here that we do need to embark on a journey to essentially upgrade and refresh the infrastructure to kind of catch up with the times. We have to be cognizant of the fact that as the application universe is moving at 100 miles an hour, the infrastructure universe cannot move at like 3 miles an hour. And that's the state of the network today. That's the state of infrastructure. And so I would just kind of jointly encourage us, the other viewers, as well as, frankly, the industry at large, to make sure that while we are addressing things like supply chain issues and all of that, which of course are pertinent, but they are temporal, that we also make sure that we're building the infrastructure for the future and don't just keep feeding the beast in terms of what has worked in the past.
That's great. Roy, you got anything to wrap up?
I would just add, as a non-engineer but telecom guy, the thing that I think Arrcus is right on top of it, they're solving a real problem that carriers have. I mean, back to my earlier points, if you don't fundamentally transform the way you're doing business, you're not going to be able to capture that next generation of growth opportunities that are out there for the taking. So, and a great space and solving a real problem.
Excellent. Krish, what's next for the network?
Yeah, I think I'm a big believer that the network will do much more than what Basque outlined. And I really look back at smartphones in 2009 and LTE in 2010, and then everyone wanted a smartphone because Snapchat came along and grandparents wanted to see the grandkids. And before you knew it, 70% of the population had smartphones. So I think something like that happens with autonomous machines, with smarter connected devices, with Web 3.0. Who knows? But I'm a big believer that once we start getting the plumbing moving at 30 miles an hour, not 3 and not 100, but at least at 30 miles an hour, you'll see a big explosion of things that alter the way we live.
Excellent. Thank you. Yoon, give us
Yes,
some wrap.
yes, I'm with the Shekhar. I just felt like as the application becomes more and more agile, much more modern, and to meet that demand, we need to modernize the infrastructure. It's almost like democratize the cloud, make it available at every service provider, every enterprise, to make it easy to use and modernize with automation.
Excellent. And Basque, what do you think?
I think it's time to move now. I mean, people always, sometimes we are guilty of being too pragmatic. It's good to be pragmatic and business oriented and ROI oriented, but sometimes we get too much into, into that. I think this is a time to dream a little bit. With subscription-based services, with SaaS, you don't have to even do a proof of concept. You just get it for a month and try it out. What's there to lose? So I would encourage people not to be inquisitive and just try it out. And you have to try a few things to see which ones works the best. So I'm trying to tell my colleagues to be a little less pragmatic, okay, or dogmatic.
That's great.
Dream a little.
That's great. You do have to watch, though, when you sign up for all those SaaS services, that you cancel the trials, or otherwise you end up with all these random charges on your credit card. But hey, this was a fantastic panel. I'm going to wrap it up now because we're out of time. I want to thank Shekhar and the Arrcus team. As many of you know, Futurium.com, we cover all these issues regularly every day, talking to end users and executives and people driving the innovation in the startup industry. So keep watch for developments from Arrcus and others. I want to thank all the panelists, some really good thoughts there. And to follow up, you'll be hearing about, this will be archived. So if somebody missed part of it, you watch for information on the archive, check back at arrcus.com. And I hope you all enjoy the rest of your day in the metaverse. Thank you very much.